Sergeant Jean Huan moved through the twisted, pearlescent hallways of the alien ship. The air smelled of ozone, scorched metal, and something faintly sweet like rotting fruit. Red emergency lights pulsed, throwing long, dancing shadows. The sounds of battle, the shriek of energy weapons, the thunder of explosions, the screams were gone. Now there was only the creak of dying metal, the distant hiss of ruptured pipes, and the low chatter of his squad in his helmet earpiece. The human victory had been total, and it had been quiet. The Valen Dominion's 7th Fleet was not destroyed. It was simply rendered pointless. Human targeting systems had picked apart their formations with cold, surgical precision. Gravity projectors had crumpled their flagship shields and warp drives without firing a single explosive round. The message was clear, and the Valens had understood it. To fight further was not brave. It was wasteful. One by one, their ships had powered down their weapons. Now, Jinhuan's unit was on board the Valen flagship, the Song of Midnight. Their job was simple: secure the command deck and confirm the surrender. They moved in practiced formation, but there was no resistance. Around corners and in doorways, Valen soldiers stood or sat, their elegant, insect-like armor dull in the gloom. They had placed their ornate energy rifles on the floor at their feet. They did not look at the humans in hatred or fear. They looked past them, their large, dark eyes blank with a shock so deep it was like a trance. Jean Huan felt no triumph. He felt tired. His body ached from the tension of the boarding action. His mind was already drifting to the quiet of his bunk on the Deadless. He wanted to wash the strange smells away. He wanted to hear a human voice without the filter of a translator. "Command deck is ahead, Sarge," came the voice of Private Min Su, young and trying to sound steady. No life signs besides a bunch of them, all clustered together. No weapons power. "Keep sharp," Jean Huan replied, his own voice a low gravel. "They've yielded, but they're not furniture." They pushed through the final set of doors, which were bent and half open. The command deck was a wide, circular room. The main view screen was shattered. Control consoles smoked and sparked. And in the center of it all, by the ruined command throne, was a group of Valen officers. They were taller than the soldiers, their armor more intricate, marked with purple and silver. They parted as the humans entered, not in a threat, but in a slow, mournful movement. They revealed their commander. She was on the floor, pinned from the waist down by a fallen support beam. Her helmet was off, revealing a pale, fine-boned face. Two slender, dark tendrils, like short braids, fell from her temples, a mark of her royal lineage. Her large eyes, a deep amethyst color, were wide with pain, but they burned with a fierce, unbroken pride. She held her head high, staring directly at the armored humans pointing rifles in her direction. One of her legs was clearly broken, the armor around it cracked and wet with a shimmering, silvery fluid. Her blood. Jean Huan held up a fist, and his squad stopped. He scanned the room. The other Valens made no move to help her, nor to attack. They simply watched, their surrender complete and hopeless. The princess was the last piece of unresolved business. Captain Dahyun's voice crackled in his ear. "Jean Huan, confirm the status of the princess commander. Intel says she's key. Is she alive?" "She's alive, sir," Jean Huan said. His eyes locked on the injured alien. "Trapped. Injured. Secure her. Bring her to the brig medbay when you can." "Understood." Jean Huan took a slow breath. He unclipped his rifle from its sling. He saw the princess's eyes track the movement, her jaw tightening. She expected the shot. She expected a warrior's death, or at least a warrior's capture. To her, it was the only way this could end. But Jean Huan was not just a warrior. He had been a paramedic in Seoul for 10 years before the first alien contact, before the draft. He had seen too much suffering, had carried too many broken people from wreckage. The sight of a trapped, injured being triggered something in him deeper than training, deeper than duty. He knelt and placed his rifle carefully on the deck. The soft click of it on the floor was loud in the quiet. His squad shifted nervously. The Valen officers stared. Ignoring them all, Jinhuan moved toward the princess. She flinched back, a hiss of pain escaping her lips. He stopped, held up his empty hands, and then slowly, deliberately pointed at the beam, then at his own shoulders and made a lifting motion. He then pointed at her, and made a carrying motion, understanding, and then fury flooded her eyes. She spat words in her lyrical, clicking language. The translator in his helmet stuttered, picking up only the tone. Defiance? Insult? Refusal? Jinhuan didn't argue. He moved to the end of the beam. It was heavy but not impossible. He braced his boots against the deck. Minsu on me. Just lift. Don't point your weapon at her. Together they heaved. Metal groaned. The princess cried out as the pressure on her leg released. The moment she was free, Jinhuan waved Minsu back. He approached her again. She was trying to push herself up, to stand, to face her captors on her feet. Her broken leg buckled instantly. She fell forward with a gasp. Jinhuan caught her before her head hit the deck. She was lighter than he expected. He shifted his grip, one arm under her knees, the other supporting her back, carefully avoiding the jagged edges of her broken armor. He stood up, holding the enemy commander in his arms like a child. The room was utterly still. His own squad was frozen. The Valens were statues, their dark eyes huge with a confusion that bordered on awe. This was not in their stories. Conquerors did not do this. The princess, Sumin, stiffened in his hold, her body rigid with outrage and pain. She did not look at him. She stared straight ahead, over his shoulder, her proud face a mask of humiliation. Without a word, Jinhuan turned. He carried her past his stunned soldiers. He carried her past her own defeated, yielding army. He walked slowly, steadily, toward the human shuttle, toward a medical bay, toward a future none of them had planned for. The war was over. Now, there was only the weight of the injured soul in his arms, and the long, silent walk home. The journey back to the human shuttle was the longest walk of Jinhuan's life. Princess Sumin was a rigid weight in his arms. She did not struggle. She did not speak. She held herself so still it seemed she was trying to become stone, to erase the fact of his touch through sheer will. He could feel the fine tremors of pain and shock running through her, a constant vibration against his chest plate. They moved through the ruined halls of her own ship. Her soldiers, those tall, slender figures in their chitinous armor, watched them pass. Their large, dark eyes followed the pair, their expressions unreadable behind their faceplates. But the silence was heavy with meaning. Jinhuan saw some of them look away, as if the sight was too strange to bear. Others stared, their heads tilting in a gesture he did not understand. There was no anger, only a deep, profound confusion. Private Minsu walked ahead, his rifle now lowered but his head on a swivel. He glanced back often, his young face visible behind his visor, etched with worry. "Sarge," the captain said the brig. "You're going to med bay." "Her leg's broken," Jinhuan said, his voice flat. "Med bay is where you go for that." "But she's the enemy commander." Jinhuan corrected quietly. "Her army yielded. The fight's done. Now she's a patient." He didn't say more. He didn't have the words to explain the old rules that still lived in his hands. On the streets of Seoul, you didn't ask who was right or wrong in a car crash before you stopped the bleeding. You just acted. This felt the same. The battle was the crash. This was the aftermath. They reached the docking umbilical, a flexible tube connecting the dying Valen ship to the robust, angular human shuttle. The light changed from pulsing red to a steady, bright white. The human environment began here. Smoother surfaces, different air smells, the faint hum of different engines as they crossed the threshold. Sumin seemed to shrink slightly in his arms. Her first breath of recycled human air was a quick, sharp intake. This was the scent of the conquerors. It was clean, sterile, and utterly alien to her. The shuttle's crew, 2 pilots and a loadmaster, stared openly as Jinhuan carried the Valen princess inside. The loadmaster opened his mouth to say something, saw Jinhuan's expression, and simply pointed to a jump seat along the wall. Jean Huan did not put her in it. He stood in the middle of the shuttle, holding her, as the craft detached with a dull thud and began its short journey back to the Deadless. He braced himself against the gentle thrust of acceleration that he could have strapped her into a seat. He knew that, but the process would have been awkward, painful. It would have felt like securing cargo. This was simpler. He was already holding her. The flight was short. The entire time, Sumin's eyes were fixed on a small, riveted metal plate on the shuttle's wall. She did not blink often. She was taking in every detail, every sound, filing it away. Her pride was a shell around her, but Jean Huan could sense the frantic mind working inside. She was assessing, calculating, trying to find the angle, the strategy in this indignity. She could find none. The shuttle docked with a soft clang and a hiss of equalizing pressure. The rear ramp lowered, revealing the vast, brightly lit hangar bay of the USTN Deadless. Human personnel in jumpsuits stopped their work. Mechanics, medics with a waiting stretcher, armed Marines providing routine security, all turned. A wave of silence spread out from the shuttle, followed by a low murmur. Jean Huan ignored it. He carried Sumin down the ramp. The human medics rushed forward with the stretcher, but he shook his head once, a tight movement. He walked past them toward the main hangar exit. He knew where the medbay was. He would take her there himself. The walk through the ship's corridors was a repeat of the first, but now the audience was human. Crew members pressed themselves against walls to let the strange procession pass. Whispers followed them like a wake. Is that there? He's just carrying her? Was there an order? Sumin, for the first time, moved. She turned her head slightly, just enough to tuck her face closer to his armored shoulder, hiding her eyes from the stares of her enemies. It was a small gesture, one of pure instinct. It was not the defiance of a commander, but the shame of a person on display. Jean Huan adjusted his grip, shifting his arm to better block the view for her. He did it without thinking. They reached the medbay. The doors slid open. The chief medical officer, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Li, looked up from a scanner. Her eyes widened for a split second, then narrowed into professional focus. She took in the Valen, the broken leg, the human sergeant holding her. Over here, Sergeant, Dr. Li said, pointing to a vacant treatment bed. Her voice was calm, cutting through the tension. Gently, Jean Huan finally laid Sumin down on the clean, white sheet. He did it carefully, supporting her head and back until she was resting. As he began to straighten up to leave, her hand moved. It was fast, a grab at his wrist guard. Her long, cool fingers gripped the hard polymer. She wasn't strong enough to hold him, but the meaning was clear. Wait. Her amethyst eyes finally met his. They searched his face, looking past his visor, which he had not yet opened. She was looking for cruelty, for triumph, for the hidden joke. She found only tiredness, and a quiet, steady resolve. She said a single, clicking word. His helmet translator, after a delay, provided a flat, digital word in his ear. Why? Jean Huan looked at her hand on his armor. He looked back at her eyes. He had no grand answer. He did not speak her language. He simply pointed at her injured leg, then placed his hand flat over his own chest, where his heart was. The meaning was simple, beyond politics, beyond war. Because you were hurt. He gently pulled his wrist from her light grip. He gave a small, brief nod to Dr. Li, then turned and walked out of the medbay. He left the enemy princess in the care of his people, the echoes of a question he couldn't properly answer hanging in the sterile air behind him. The medbay was a world of soft sounds. The beep of monitors, the hum of sanitizer fields, the low murmur of human voices. Sumin lay perfectly still on the bed, her leg encased in a soft, blue stabilization field. The human doctor and her assistants had been efficient and impersonal. They had scanned her, treated her with a cold spray that took the sharp edge off the pain, and applied the field. They did not speak to her, only about her, in their short, choppy language. They had left her alone. Alone, but not unobserved. A clear wall separated her bed from the main hallway. Humans passed by. Soldiers, crew, some in medical scrubs. Their eyes always found her. Some were curious. Some were hard. All of them saw the enemy. She replayed the events in her mind, searching for a flaw in her understanding. The battle, a storm of light and fury, ending not in glorious fire but in a slow, sickening realization of human technological superiority. The surrender, the most bitter command she had ever given. Then the boots on her deck. The human soldier kneeling. The beam lifting. The shame of being lifted like a child. Her face burned. The memory of his arms around her was more vivid than the pain in her leg. It was a violation of every code. Commander should be captured with formal words. She should be a prisoner of war, a trophy, a bargaining chip. Not this broken thing carried to a healer. The door hissed open. She tensed, expecting the doctor or perhaps an interrogator. It was him. The soldier. He had removed his bulky armor. He wore a simple gray shipsuit. He was older than she first thought, lines of weariness around his eyes. He carried a tray. On it was a covered dish, a cup, and a small, flat tablet device. He did not smile. He did not look triumphant. He walked to the side of her bed, placed the tray on a rolling table and pushed it toward her. He pointed at the dish, then made a simple eating motion with his fingers. She stared at the tray, then at him. Was this a test? Poison? Some cultural insult? Her own hunger was a dull ache, ignored until now. She shook her head once, a sharp refusal. The soldier, Jean Huan, nodded as if this was the answer he expected. He picked up the tablet, tapped it, and turned the screen toward her. It showed a rotating image of a blue and green planet, Earth, she assumed. He swiped, and it changed to a bowl of steaming grains and vegetables. He pointed from the image to her covered dish. He was showing her what the food was. He was assuring her it was safe and that it matched her biology. The humans had researched her people's dietary needs. The practicality of it, the quiet thoroughness, was unsettling. Still, she did not move. Pride was a wall inside her. Jean Huan did not push. He pulled a chair from the wall and sat down, not too close, but not far away. He placed the tablet on the bed beside her, within her reach. Then he took a small kit from his pocket. He began to clean his sidearm, a blocky human pistol. He field stripped it with smooth, practiced movements, wiping each part with a cloth, checking it, reassembling it. He did not look at her. He gave her his attention, but not his stare. It was a strange, peaceful ritual. The click and snap of metal parts was a clean sound in the sterile room. He was a guard, but he was not threatening her. He was just there, present. Minutes passed. The smell from the covered dish began to seep out. It was strange, but not unpleasant. Her body betrayed her. A small sound came from her stomach. She flinched, horrified. Jean Huan did not react. He finished reassembling the pistol, holstered it, and leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling for a moment, then closed his eyes. He seemed almost to be resting. Her hand moved almost on its own. She reached out and lifted the cover. The food was a simple stew of grains and soft vegetables, a pale yellow color. It was bland-looking, designed for compatibility. She picked up the spoon, a clumsy human utensil. She took a small bite. It was warm. It was flavorless, but it was food. She ate, slowly at first, then with more purpose, her eyes fixed on the wall across from her. When she was done, she put the spoon down. He opened his eyes. He stood, collected the tray, and picked up the tablet. This time, he tapped it and a simple, melodic sound filled the quiet space around them. It was a stringed instrument, plucked in a flowing, sad tune. It was alien, but it was unmistakably music. He set the tablet back down, the music playing softly. He pointed to the image on the screen now. A crowded, neon-lit street at night, full of human faces and glowing signs. He pointed to a specific spot, a small, well-lit apartment window high up in a tower. Then he pointed to his own chest. My home. The meaning was clear. He was not showing her the power of his empire. He was showing her a window, a small, personal place. He was giving her context, not a threat. Then, without a word, he left, taking the empty tray with him. Sumin was alone again with the soft music and the image of that distant window. Her anger was still there, a hot coal in her chest. But around it, confusion was building a nest. This was not how conquerors behaved. They did not provide food, and music, and glimpses of home. They demanded. They took. She looked at her leg in the healing field. They had fixed what was broken without asking for anything. The soldier had guarded her while she ate, without demanding answers. He had shown her a piece of his world and asked for nothing in return. For the first time since the beam had pinned her, the cold knot of terror in her stomach began to loosen, replaced by a deeper, more unsettling feeling. She did not understand these humans at all, and that was far more dangerous than any weapon. The quiet routine settled like dust. Each day, the human soldier, Jin Huan, came. He brought food. He left the tablet. He sat in the chair, sometimes cleaning his gear, sometimes just sitting quietly. He never stayed too long. He never forced her to speak. Sumin's body was healing. The medical field did its work. She could sit up. The humans had given her a simple, soft garment to wear instead of her broken armor. It felt like wearing a cloud, and it made her feel exposed, unmoored from her identity. Her mind was a storm. She replayed the battle tactics. The human fleet moved like a single, terrible mind. Their weapons did not just hit. They disassembled. A gravity pulse would twist a ship's spine without an explosion. It was a violence done with chilling calm. They fought to end the fight, not to prove a point. That efficiency had broken her fleet's spirit faster than any bloodthirsty charge ever could. And then there was this. The aftermath. This careful, silent treatment. It was a different kind of efficiency. It was breaking her point one day. When Jin Huan placed the tablet beside her, she did not let him walk away. She pointed a slender finger at the device, then at him, and made a sweeping gesture with her hand. "Show me more." He paused, then nodded. He pulled his chair closer, still keeping a respectful distance. He took the tablet. He did not show her more of Earth's wonders or cities. Instead, he pulled up a map of the star system, highlighting the human and Valen positions. The entire Valen fleet was marked in a soft, neutral yellow, holding position. Not attacking, not retreating, just waiting. He pointed to the yellow markers, then to her. A question was in his eyes. She understood. He was asking about her people. He was asking why they did not leave or try to rescue her. The shame returned, hot and sharp. She looked away from the screen. After a long moment, she reached for the tablet. He let her take it. She found a drawing program. With careful, deliberate strokes of her finger, she began to draw. Not a map or a ship. She drew a single Valen figure in full ceremonial armor, holding a long, ornate blade pointed at its own chest. She zoomed in on the blade, and along its edge, she drew a series of intricate knots and loops. She handed the tablet back. Jin Huan studied the drawing. His brow furrowed. He did not understand the knots. He pointed at the blade at the figure's chest, his expression asking why. Sumin touched her own chest, where her heart was, then pointed back at the drawing. The meaning was clear. Honor. For a Valen commander to be captured in such a personal, merciful way by a conqueror, it created a debt. A debt that could not be settled by war. To attack now would stain the honor of every soldier who had yielded. Her army was paralyzed not by human weapons, but by human actions. His actions. Jin Huan sat back in his chair. He looked at the drawing for a long time. A deep weariness seemed to settle over him, heavier than before. He had not meant to do this. He had only picked up an injured person. He had started a chain of events he never intended. He erased the drawing. On a fresh screen, he typed a single word using human letters. He showed it to her. Peace. Sumin looked at the word. It was a child's question, a naive hope. Peace was a political calculation, a balance of power after a clear victory. This was not that. Her people were not negotiating from strength. They were frozen in a cultural dilemma he had accidentally created. She could not explain all this. Instead, She took the tablet. Below his word, she drew two simple figures. One was a human, blocky and simple. The other was Valen, slender. She did not draw them shaking hands or trading items. She drew a vast, empty space between them. Then she drew a single, small, shaky line connecting the two figures. She pointed at the line, then pointed back and forth between Jinhuan and herself. The message was bleak, but honest. There was no peace. There was only this, a single, thin, fragile connection. A bridge built by one man carrying one woman. It was not enough to hold the weight of two empires. But it existed. It was the only thing that did. Jinhuan understood. He nodded slowly. He wasn't a diplomat. He was a sergeant. He had built a bridge he didn't know how to cross, and now everyone was waiting on the other side, unsure what to do. That day, he did not leave when the meal was done. He sat with her in the quiet, both of them looking at the simple drawing of the fragile line. The war outside was over. The real, more complicated problem had just begun, and it was sitting with them in the sterile, white room. It was a problem of honor, of mercy, and of a single act of kindness that had somehow become the most powerful weapon in the sector. Jinhuan was called to the captain's briefing room 2 days later. The summons was short. He walked through the clean, bright corridors of the Deadless, feeling out of place. The quiet of the med bay, the silent company of the princess, felt like a different world. The briefing room was small. Captain Daehyun stood at a data table, its surface glowing with star charts. Beside him was a woman Jinhuan recognized. Hai Jin, the civilian Xeno-diplomat. She wore a simple ship suit, but her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. "Sergeant," Captain Daehyun said. "Seat." Jinhuan sat, back straight. He waited. The captain tapped the table. The star charts vanished, replaced by a video feed. It showed the Valen fleet, dozens of ships, hanging motionless against the dark of space. Their energy signatures were low, dormant. "They are still there," Daehyun said. "They have made no hostile moves. They have not responded to our standard hails for negotiation. They are just waiting." He looked at Jinhuan. "Our analysts are confused. Defeated fleets retreat or they fight to the death. They do not park themselves and go quiet. You have spent time with their commander. Explain it." Jinhuan's mouth felt dry. "It's not a military problem, sir." Haijin leaned forward, her interest clear. "Then what is it?" Jinhuan thought of the drawing. The blade at the chest. The knots of honor. "It's cultural, ma'am. To them, the way she was captured. It matters. I didn't take her as a prisoner of war. I took her to a doctor. In their code, I think it creates an obligation. A debt. To attack us now, after that, would be dishonorable for them. Worse than losing." The captain stared. "You are telling me the entire Valen 7th Fleet is standing down because you gave first aid?" "No, sir," Jinhuan said, choosing his words slowly. "They are standing down because we won the battle. They yielded to our strength. But they are not leaving because of the first aid. They are stuck. They can't fight because of honor. They can't leave their commander. They're waiting for a correct way to end this." Haijin's lips curved into a small, understanding smile. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who has just seen a hidden trap and a hidden door. "They need a ritual," she said softly. "A ceremony. A way to square the circle of defeat with honor." She looked at Jinhuan. "You, Sergeant, have accidentally performed the first act of a Valen reconciliation ritual. You showed mercy to a high-ranking foe without demanding anything. In their stories, that is something only a being of immense strength and confidence does." Jinhuan felt a hollow feeling in his stomach. "I just didn't want to leave her there." "I believe you," Haijin said. "That is what makes it so potent. There was no calculation. It was a pure act. And now we must decide how to finish the ritual." Captain Daehyun rubbed his temples. "Diplomat, are you saying we need to give her back?" With a bow and a formal speech. "More or less," Haijin said. "But it must be done correctly. It must acknowledge their honor and ours. If we just dump her in a shuttle, it becomes an insult. If we hold her as a prisoner, the debt remains, and their entire culture will eventually decide the only way to clear it is a war of total annihilation to erase the shame. She looked at the frozen fleet on the screen. They are not our prisoners. We are all prisoners of their custom now, thanks to the sergeant's good heart. The weight of it pressed down on Jinhuan. He had thought he was solving a small problem, one injured person. He had instead triggered a large, delicate machine he didn't understand. "What do you need from me, sir?" he asked, his voice low. Captain Daehyun looked at Hygiene, then back at him. "You started this. You will finish it. You will be the one to return her. Diplomat Hygiene will arrange the setting, the formalities. But you will be the human face of it. You carried her in. You will hand her back." The idea filled Jinhuan with a deep unease. He was a soldier, not a symbol. "They might see that as weakness, sir. A low-ranking soldier doing a diplomat's job." Hygiene shook her head. "No. They will see it as consistency. The same man who showed mercy will now show respect. Completes the circle. It tells them the act was not a fluke, but a reflection of who we are." She paused. "Or at least, who we can appear to be for one afternoon." Jinhuan sat in silence. He thought of Sumin in the medbay, drawing that thin, shaky line between their two figures. This was it. This was the other side of the bridge. He would have to walk across it, with everyone watching. "When?" he asked. "Soon," Captain Daehyun said. "Her leg is almost healed. The longer we wait, the more chance their politics back home get messy. We do this cleanly and their fleet leaves. We have peace in this sector. All because of you, Sergeant." They said it like it was a good thing, a victory. Jinhuan only felt tired. He had not wanted a victory. He had only wanted to do the right thing in a single moment. Now that moment was going to define everything that came next. He stood. "I understand, sir." He left the briefing room. The corridor seemed longer on the way back. He was not returning to a simple guard duty anymore. He was returning to prepare for a performance that would decide the fate of thousands. And the only other person who knew how heavy that felt was an enemy princess who could barely speak his language. The place chosen was a neutral asteroid dock, a forgotten fuel station in the dark space between fronts. It was not grand. It was all bare metal and cold, still air. But it was clean, and it was empty of weapons. Jinhuan stood at the airlock of the human shuttle. He wore a clean, pressed shipsuit, not his armor. Felt wrong, like wearing pajamas to a funeral. Diplomat Hygiene stood beside him, dressed in a simple, dark uniform. She had briefed him. "Walk with her. Stop at the designated line. Wait, let them approach. Let her take the final steps. Remember," Hygiene said quietly, "you are not giving back stolen property. You are completing an exchange that began the moment you lifted that beam. Dignity is everything." Jinhuan nodded. His mouth was dry. The inner door hissed open. Sumin walked out, escorted by a medic. Her own people had sent over traditional clothes for her. A layered gown of deep purple and silver, flowing and elegant. It hid the healing leg completely. Her face was calm, a mask of perfect composure. She looked every inch the Princess Commander again. Only her eyes, when they met Jinhuan's, held a flicker of the shared understanding from the medbay. This was a play. They were both actors now. She walked to stand beside him. She did not look at him. The outer airlock door slid open with a grind of old gears. A wide docking bay stretched before them. At the far end, 100 meters away, a Valen shuttle sat, its lines graceful and organic. And before it, arranged in perfect, silent rows, was the honor guard of the Valen 7th Fleet. They were magnificent. Tall, clad in polished armor that gleamed under the station lights, holding ornate energy lances upright. Their faces were hidden behind engraved helms. At their front stood a single, older Valen in elaborate robes. General Tan, her uncle. His posture was rigid, his expression like stone. He was waiting for a trick, for an insult. The walk across the empty bay was the longest of Jinhuan's life. The only sound was the soft rustle of Sumin's gown and the echo of their boots on the metal deck. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes. Human observers behind him in the shuttle. Valen warriors ahead. All watching the sergeant and the princess. He walked slowly, matching his pace to hers. He did not offer his arm. She did not need it. She walked with a straight back, her chin high, her eyes fixed on her uncle. They reached the painted line on the floor, the agreed-upon midpoint. They stopped. For a moment there was absolute silence. The general's eyes swept over his niece, checking for signs of harm, of mistreatment. He saw none. He saw dignity. Then his cold gaze landed on Jin Huan, sizing up the simple human in the plain suit. This was the moment. Jin Huan knew what was expected. A formal nod, a step back. But it felt wrong. Felt like dropping something. He thought of the thin line she had drawn between them. This was severing it, officially, in front of everyone. Instead of stepping back, he turned to face her. Just slightly. Sumin, sensing the break in the script, turned her head to look at him. Jin Huan did not bow. He did not salute. Those were military gestures, and this was not that anymore. He simply looked at her and gave a slow, single nod of his head. It was the same nod he had given in the medbay. It was a human gesture. Said, "I see you." "It is done." He saw her mask tremble, just for a second. Her amethyst eyes were wide. She was waiting for the final, formal word. The translated line Hygiene had prepared that he didn't say it. Words would ruin it. Then Sumin moved. She did not bow to him. A bow would be from a subordinate. She did not offer her hand, a human custom. She closed her right hand into a fist. Slowly, deliberately, she brought that fist to the center of her chest, pressing it over her heart. She held it there. Her eyes never left his. A sharp, collective intake of breath came from the Valen ranks. A few of the warriors in the front row subtly shifted their weight. General Tan's stone face showed a crack of pure shock. Jin Huan did not know the gesture, but he understood its gravity. It was profound. It was personal. It was from her to him, not from the princess to the sergeant. She was calling them equal. She was acknowledging a debt, not of a prisoner to a captor, but of one being to another. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then, Sumin lowered her hand. She turned her back on Jin Huan and walked the final 10 steps to her people. She did not look back. General Tan's eyes drilled into Jin Huan for another long moment. The suspicion was still there, but it was now mixed with a frustrated, grudging respect. The human had not just returned his niece. He had returned her with her honor not just intact, but enhanced. The ritual, though alien, was complete. The general gave a sharp, sideways slice of his hand. The honor guard parted. Sumin walked through them and into the open shuttle door. The Valens began to move. A silent, flowing retreat. Jin Huan stood at the line, alone now. He watched the shuttle door close. He watched as the Valen warriors filed away. Soon, the bay was empty again. He felt a hand on his shoulder. "Hygiene." Her voice was soft with awe. "Sergeant, do you have any idea what she just did?" "No," Jin Huan said truthfully, still staring at the spot where the shuttle had been. "That was the Tan Vor, the fist to the heart. It is given in our histories maybe once a generation. It is not given to allies. It is given to an adversary who has shown such profound honor that they are considered a redeemed. Worthy." She let out a slow breath. "You didn't just end a war, Jin Huan. You changed the story." Jin Huan finally turned and walked back to the human shuttle. He felt empty. The weight was gone, but so was the quiet company. The bridge was crossed. He had carried the injured enemy princess home, and her army, having long since yielded, was finally free to leave. All that was left was the long, quiet trip back to his ship, and the memory of a fist pressed to a heart in the silent, cold dark. There was no parade. No ceremony. The Deadless hummed with its normal routines. The war was over. The Valen fleet had powered up its drives and slipped away into the dark, not as a retreat, but as a dignified withdrawal. The crew was happy, but the happiness was quiet. It was the relief of a job done, of going home. For Jinhuan, home was a small bunk and a locker. He returned to his duties. He inspected equipment. He ran drills with his squad. People looked at him differently now. Their looks held a kind of respect, but it was mixed with a distance. He was the man who had done the strange thing that ended the war. He was a good luck charm, but also a puzzle. They didn't know what to say to him. He preferred the silence. He volunteered for long, quiet patrols along the ship's outer corridors, where the only view was the endless stars through the thick ports. He thought about Earth. He thought about the busy streets of Busan, the smell of the sea, the sound of his family's voices. It all felt very far away, and very small. A month passed. The Daedalus was on its way back to a human station for reassignment. The incident with the Valen princess was becoming a story, a piece of history. Jinhuan was starting to believe he could leave it behind, that he could go back to being just a sergeant. It was during one of his solo patrols that his personal data slate, tucked in his pocket, chimed with a priority alert. Not a ship alert. Private, encrypted data packet. The sender field was blank. He stopped by a viewing port, a quiet alcove off the main hall. He pulled out the slate. His heart beat a little faster. He opened the packet. There was no text, no video message. There was a single image. It was a photograph, but not a human one. The colors were softer. The light seemed to come from within the objects. It showed a garden. But this garden was not on the ground. Floating islands of rich, dark soil and moss hung in a calm, golden sky. On them grew delicate, luminous plants with fronds that trailed like silver threads. A waterfall drifted between the islands, its water falling in slow, perfect droplets that caught the light like jewels. It was serene, beautiful, and utterly alien. It was a Valen floating garden. At the bottom of the image, written not in the elegant loops of the Valen script, but in clumsy, carefully formed human letters, were two words. Thank you. Jinhuan stared at the image. He looked at the words. He knew who it was from. There was only one person it could be from. This was not a message from a government or a fleet. This was from Sumin. She had learned the human words. She had chosen them. He looked from the peaceful, floating garden back out the viewport at the hard, cold vacuum and the sharp, distant stars. For the first time, the universe did not feel just empty and full of threats. Felt occupied. It held other beautiful things, other quiet places, other people who understood a simple thank you. The message held no demands. It asked for no reply. It did not speak of alliances or politics. It was a closing of the circle she had started with the fist to her heart. It was a personal sign, sent across the vast dark, saying that the thin line between them, the bridge, was still there. It was not a road for armies. It was a path for two people who had met in a strange, quiet place after a war. A soft smile touched Jinhuan's lips, a real one. For the first time in a long while, he saved the image. He did not show it to Captain Daehyun or diplomat Hygiene. This was not for them. This was not for history books. He finished his patrol, his steps lighter. Back in his bunk, before he slept, he looked at the image one more time. He thought of a princess, home in her floating garden, looking at a picture of a small apartment window in a city on Earth. Two different worlds. Two different kinds of peace. He had carried the injured enemy princess home. Her army had yielded. And now, in the silence after everything, she had sent back a piece of her home to him. It was not a treaty. It was better. It was a connection. A small, fragile, human thing in a very big universe. And for now, that was enough.